Good morning, all of you. In today's class, we will be learning about the XSD restrictions or facets. So, facets or restrictions are those rules which will be applied on the elements and the values they will be taking up. So, let us have them one by one. First one is the restriction on the value. If the value is having some restriction, we can have mention it in the form of access colon restriction on that particular element. So, name of the element is name. Name of the element is age, and it is simple type, and it is restrictive with respect to the data type. It is integer, and minimum and maximum number which is inclusive, that means you can include 0 as well as 120 is between this 0 and 120. Now the second kind of restriction is when you apply certain values. Out of certain values only you can take some of the values for the element. So here we are taking the element as car, and the restriction is that it is string. Of course, the values are taken up from the enumerated types. And what are those enumerations? There are different values like Audi, Golf, BMW, and so on. So we can mention those in the enumeration. If you will require that that particular car has a different data type, rather than taking it as a string, I am mentioning it as a car type. That means that it will be a user defined data type, and now I am taking up this data type, that is the car type, as the simple type, and apply the restrictions like string and these values only. So it will take values between Audi, Golf, and BMW. Now the next one is for values. If you take some value, the element, suppose the letter, is having a value, but it will take a restrictive value in the given set of letters only. So letters are between small a to the small z. So if you take any letter from A to Z, you have to mention these in the square brackets. So if you mention something in the square bracket, this will become the regular expression for this particular element, and therefore it will take the value from this particular pattern only. Now, now the next example is, here we have taken up the initials. The name of the element is initials, and the value it can take is from A to Z, capital, and there are 3 different types of such sets. So this means that you can have 3 different letters as their initials, and these are 3 characters of the capital letters in English language. The same is true for if you want to take the set as small letters as well as the capital letters. The only difference is that you do not have to mention a comma between these two. So if you specify the range, say small a to z and the capital A to Z, you are not supposed to add a comma in between z, and the A. So this is the set of all possible letters which you will be taking for the first character, then the second, and following the third character. Now, if you want to mention only a single letter, then no commas will be there in between the allowed characters. So X, Y, and Z are the 3 allowed characters, out of which you will be taking only a single one, ek hi lenge, and but you are not supposed to take the comma in between these X, Y, and Z. Now, if the element comes from the set of numbers, then the base, that is the data type, is of integers, and it is having a restriction. And what is the restriction on the pattern? So pattern will be having 5 digits. So it is only a 5-digit number. So if you have to mention like this, it will be there. Now the next restriction is this series of values. So if you have a range, allowed range, you have mentioned it A to Z, then you have mentioned a asterisk. So if you have mentioned an asterisk out of the set, this means that it is 0 or more occurrences of such. So this means that letter is having 0 or more occurrences of the small letters only. So if you have an element in such a way that it contains only small letter elements, small letter English letters, then you have to mention it like this only. Now the next one is that if you include capitals also. So but in this case I have taken up this one in a square bracket ending as well as the following square bracket. So this means that you will be taking 2 different letters, one small, one capital, and a plus indicates that it will be one or more occurrences of such pairs. So you have a pair of small letter and capital letter. This will be one pair, and these number of pairs can be one or more pairs in the element. In the case you have a pattern in the XML document, you can mention like this also. Now for the next example, I am taking up this one. The element is gender. So if you have an element which is gender, then it will be containing two different type of genders, male or female. So therefore you have to you use one out of these two. So you mention male or, and now or is represented by a vertical bar. Next example is an interesting one. When you take some element as a password, if a password is there and you have to mention that it is string type password, but it will be made only by the restrictive set of characters. So what is the restrictive set of characters? Here you have mentioned A to Z small, then capital A to Z and the digits. So you can take up your password as a combination of small capital letters as well as the digits from 0 to 9. And if this curly bracket 8 here means that it will be having a length 8. So if you need a password of length 8 only, you have to mention like this only. Now the next restriction is on the white spaces. If you mention that white space character, any element which contains the white spaces, if you need to preserve them, no change in the white characters. Now how many of number of white spaces are there, you can apply this restriction on the white space. So here you have to mention excess white space and the value is preserved. In the same manner, you can have white space, but the value is now replaced. So you will be replacing all the characters which are represented by white space, like the carriage return, enter or line feed. All those will be replaced by white space. And next one is the restriction on the white space, which will be collapsing. So it will collapse all these such special characters which are mentioned by this, and these will be replaced by the spaces. Leading and trailing both are removed, and multiple spaces are reduced into a single space. So all these things can be done by the single command. Now the next restriction is about the length and restriction on length. So you have mentioned the restriction length and the value is 8. This means that the length of the password should be 8, apart from the fact that it is of a string data type. Now rather than mentioning the exact length, you can mention the minimum length as well as the maximum length, and here you have mentioned the number, the minimum length as well as the maximum length. So in this way, what you can do is we have learned how we can impose restrictions on the data types, and these all restrictions have been discussed like the one which are given in the W3 schools. I hope that the lecture was interesting and you have got those things. If you got any doubt, please mention in the comments, and do please share, like and subscribe the channel. Thank you very much.